The bid for a sixth straight NL East crown begins now for the Braves as they hit the fields of Cool Today Park for spring training. And there's a key question facing this roster as they break camp. Who's going to be the fifth starter? This is BPTV, Cory McCartney and Grant McAuley with you. As we look to answer that question, Grant, suffice to say, this is not a run-of-the-mill battle for a final rotation spot.
No, it's really not. I think it's one of the more intriguing storylines we're going to see throughout the course of the spring, and there's no shortage of capable candidates and some big stories of redemption, I think, for a couple of these guys, in particular with Mike Soroka and obviously Ian Anderson with what he went through in 2022. A little bit more of an odyssey than he had been accustomed to in his first couple of years in the big leagues, but I don't think anybody's been on a bigger odyssey when it comes to injury or just being off the field for the Braves than Mike Soroka the past couple of years. So, yeah, Corey, I think all eyes are going to be on who is going to round out the Braves rotation in 2023 because those first four spots, they look pretty good.
So Bryce Elder had some great moments last year, a 1.65 ERA over his last five starts, and he's a factor in this, but obviously the conversation is largely revolving around the attempted bounce backs here of Ian Anderson and Mike Soroka, and for good reason. I mean, Anderson was demoted to AAA last August, but this guy's got a resume that includes one of the best postseason starts to a career in history, the second best ERA since 1913 through 8 postseason outings, and Soroka, of course, a former NL Rookie of the Year runner-up, looked to be an ace in the making before a twice torn Achilles robbed him of building on that momentum. And then there's the added nugget of Soroka told us at Brace Fest that he's rooming with Anderson this spring, but you're talking about two arms that have performed at elite levels before, and now they're looking to recapture that. Grant, what are you specifically looking for those two this spring as they try to, create that separation amongst themselves?
Yeah, now Mike Soroka has been known to drop the odd pearl, but saying that Ian Anderson's probably his best friend on the team certainly ratcheted up this competition, at least in the eyes of others. Now, Mike's not necessarily looking at it as a competition per se. He wants his friend to do well. His friend wants him to do well. But yes, there are only so many spots in rotation to go around. But, as you talked about the credentials of Mike Soroka, yeah, he was a runner-up for the Rookie of the Year. He's already been an all-star in his young career. He was the Braves opening day starter in 2020, and then he had to hit pause in his career. And I think as much as anything, and from talking to Mike, who we all know is one of the more thoughtful players that you'll find of any age and any experience level in all of baseball, maybe all of sports, you just can't help but pull for this guy. But it's going to be proving that he can get back to where he was. I think his minor league time last year, that handful of starts that he got, really helped him knock some rust off and get himself ready. Meanwhile, for Anderson, I think you and I talked about it on From the Diamond throughout the year last year. You just kind of wondered, are the Braves going to have to go ahead and hit the reset button on Ian Anderson, send him down to AAA? And he kept wondering and wondering. He kept getting starts, but eventually they had to make that decision in the second half. And his time in AAA didn't necessarily make you feel like he had turned the corner just yet. But the work continued in the offseason for Ian Anderson. He was up at Wake Forest in their pitching laboratory looking to get himself ready. It's going to be consistency. It's going to be developing that third pitch. That's going to be the key for him. For Soroka, it's being healthy and being able to stay that way, because if he's on the mound every fifth day looking anything like he did to start his career, I feel like he'll have the inside track. But Anderson, as you mentioned, he's got some pretty good accolades under his belt in a very young career. So this is going to be a fascinating battle. And I know that Bryce Elder's name is put into this quite a bit, and he did have some success, some important starts for the Braves late in the year. It was against some lesser competition, I will say that. So you kind of wonder if that maybe is something to temper those expectations as he tests his mettle against maybe some tougher lineups.
Yeah, and I think with Anderson, it's really, you mentioned it, about expanding that pitch mix, because the four-seam average jumped 90 points in 2022. Subsequently, it made that vaunted changeup of his less effective. He had an increase there in average exit velocity. I know he's thrown a curve, but it was just at 18% usage in 2022. So I think becoming something more than a two-pitch pitcher is really going to be the key for him. And with Soroka, I think you just want to see him keep building on that workload. I don't think anyone is questioning the drive or the stuff. And he had some bright moments during those 22 minor league innings that he had last season. But when he was at the top of his game, you're talking about a slider that had a 111 average against in 2022, 154 in 2019. Is he going to be that guy again? I mean, if he is, this is going to be absolutely fascinating and a difficult decision. But I'm not saying that the guy who doesn't break camp with a rotation spot, the other guy's going to log starts in 2023. Starts are going to be had, but there's obviously something symbolic about being a part of that rotation when you break camp. So Grant, I mean, this does feel like it could be a coin flip, but in your mind, who's it going to be?
I feel like again, and not to have already dropped a spoiler on this. I think that Soroka has the inside track if indeed he's healthy. The Braves have stuck with him for a very long time. I mean, there might have been some clubs. I know his age obviously factors into this as well, but there may have been some clubs that looked at this injury and said, "Look, we're going to have to non-tender this guy. Maybe we get him back. Maybe he goes somewhere else." So the Braves, if they thought about it, well, they didn't let it happen, and they've held on to him. And I think that's for a purpose, for a reason, and that's to have him back in their starting rotation. So I do feel like he's going to have every opportunity, as we know. But I think Ian Anderson is going to be afforded these same opportunities throughout the course of the spring. Health is going to be a big factor. And as you just touched on, and I think it's really important to remind people, no, they're not going to go with a 6-man rotation for a longer period of time than maybe throwing someone in to give somebody an extra day of rest here and there. But you're not going to get through the whole season with just 5 starting pitchers. That's just not a thing that happens in today's modern era of baseball. So these guys are going to have a role to play. I think Bryce Elder's going to have a role to play. And there could be some other arms in this system that will be starting games for the Braves at some point in the course of 2023. I would hope that it would be kind of a low number, not too far beyond the 5, 6, 7 guys that you need. But we'll see how all of that plays out. And of course, opportunity can really open the door for excellent performances. And that was the case of Ian Anderson in 2020. The Braves rotation needed somebody to step in and help stabilize, and he did just that. He had some very good outings in the postseason, and I think they continue to see him as somebody who they can factor into their rotation in the future. But he does have to get that changeup back on track. I think he needs to throw it for a strike a little bit more often. And you mentioned his curve usage. That actually felt high to me. It just didn't feel like that he was throwing that many curveballs throughout the course of the year, but the numbers are what they are. And unfortunately for Anderson, the final results numbers were not what we were accustomed to seeing, and something he's going to work very hard to correct this spring.
Yeah, I think the story of the 2 Achilles surgeries, the drive that he has to be back to what he was, I'm going to go with Soroka like you. I don't know if he's going to be out of the gate as dominant as he was, but I think a healthy Soroka, I have fewer questions about the arsenal than I do with Anderson as he tries to move beyond being that 4-seam changeup guy. So it's going to be can't miss, to say the least, throughout camp, but I think Soroka is going to end up being the guy who breaks camp as that number 5 starter. Make sure you ride with us all the way to opening day here on BPTV. So subscribe, turn on notifications to get alerts every time that we drop a new episode. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves Country.